You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your educational journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Monitoring and control are the disciplines that keep risks and impediments visible, manageable, and proportionately addressed before they spiral into major failures. The orientation emphasizes proactive tracking, where clear indicators, thresholds, and rehearsed responses ensure that exposure remains within limits agreed by stakeholders. This is not about endless dashboards or generic status reports, but about building a system of vigilance that balances safety with speed. When monitoring is intentional and controls are well designed, teams can detect weak signals early, act consistently, and recover quickly from disruptions. Monitoring ensures that risks are not forgotten, while control ensures that responses are reliable and repeatable. Together, they transform uncertainty from a lurking threat into a managed dimension of everyday delivery. Done well, monitoring and control protect predictability, resilience, and trust, ensuring that delivery remains steady under pressure. A monitoring plan provides the backbone of vigilance by linking each identified risk to its leading indicators, observation windows, and designated owner. For example, a dependency on a vendor API might be tied to latency thresholds checked hourly, with an integration steward accountable for follow-up. A security assumption may be monitored with weekly vulnerability scans reviewed by an assigned lead. By pairing risks with specific signals and owners, monitoring becomes deliberate rather than passive. Observation windows ensure that checks align with how quickly risks can shift, preventing both under and over monitoring. The plan also provides transparency, showing stakeholders how vigilance is structured and who is responsible. This discipline transforms risk tracking from reactive attention to an intentional, systematic practice. A strong monitoring plan ensures that early signs are captured, accountability is clear, and escalation is possible before risks escalate into incidents. Early warning signals are the subtle precursors that foreshadow bigger problems, and they are central to effective monitoring. Common signals include aging items that linger too long in queues, rising error rates that hint at declining stability, capacity saturation warnings, missed handoffs between teams, and assumption drift where expected conditions no longer hold. For example, if user onboarding tasks consistently stall in testing, that aging signal may predict a delivery slip. Similarly, small but consistent increases in latency may signal an impending outage. By treating these as legitimate indicators, organizations shift from reactive firefighting to predictive management. Early warning signals give teams lead time to intervene with proportionate actions, buying stability while deeper fixes are prepared. They also build resilience, as vigilance is tuned not just to events already in motion, but to precursors that can be acted upon before damage is done. Thresholds and triggers convert raw observations into actionable rules, ensuring that responses are predictable and proportionate. Instead of endless debate over whether a signal warrants action, thresholds define ranges, and triggers define what happens when limits are crossed. For example, a defect escape rate above 5% may automatically trigger a backlog review, while error rates exceeding tolerance may require rollback. By predefining these thresholds, organizations prevent overreaction to noise and underreaction to meaningful drift. They also build trust, as stakeholders see that responses are principled, not arbitrary. Triggers anchor accountability, ensuring that teams know when and how to respond. They shorten decision latency, as no new debates are needed once conditions are met. This structure transforms monitoring from passive observation into active governance, turning metrics into the levers of proportionate, timely control. A control catalog accelerates consistency by enumerating preventative, detective, and corrective measures tied to common risk types. Preventative controls stop issues before they occur, such as access restrictions or automated test gates. Detective controls spot anomalies, like monitoring dashboards or synthetic probes. Corrective controls restore stability, such as rollback procedures or escalation playbooks. For example, when a vendor integration slows, a stub fallback may be the corrective control already documented in the catalog. By predefining these measures, teams reduce cognitive load under stress, since responses are already matched to risk categories. The catalog also enables rapid onboarding, teaching new members what safeguards exist and how to use them. By systematizing controls, organizations avoid improvisation and ensure that monitoring flows seamlessly into proportionate action. This reduces both response time and error, strengthening resilience under pressure. Role definitions make monitoring and control credible by clarifying who acts, who decides, and who verifies results. Roles may include risk stewards responsible for continuous scanning, incident commanders who coordinate responses during elevated risk periods, and reviewers who confirm that mitigations achieved their purpose. For example, when latency spikes, the steward detects and escalates, the commander directs containment, and the reviewer validates that rollback restored service. Role clarity prevents confusion and duplication, especially under stress. It also avoids gaps where everyone assumes someone else is acting. By defining roles in advance, monitoring becomes not just about signals but about the human system that interprets and responds. This structure builds confidence that risks are not just observed but actively managed by accountable roles, ensuring swift, coordinated, and verified responses. Cadence of review ensures that monitoring remains proportionate to volatility. High volatility items require frequent checks, sometimes daily or hourly, while stable exposures can be reviewed on longer cycles. For example, uptime error rates may require near real-time review, while compliance documentation may be checked monthly. By aligning cadence with volatility, organizations avoid both wasted effort and dangerous blind spots. Regular reviews also maintain discipline, preventing risks from drifting stale in registers. Cadence creates rhythm and predictability, reassuring stakeholders that vigilance is ongoing. It balances efficiency with safety, ensuring that resources are not exhausted, but exposure remains within agreed limits. This structured timing turns monitoring into an expected, reliable routine, making vigilance sustainable. A unified register prevents fragmentation by consolidating risks, impediments, decisions, and evidence into one accessible system. Without it, risks scatter across spreadsheets, tools, and conversations, leading to lost context and duplicated work. A unified register creates a single authoritative view showing the status of each risk, its history of decisions, and associated evidence. For example, an entry may show that a vulnerability was logged, mitigated with a configuration change, and scheduled for remediation next cycle, with all approvals attached. This consolidation reduces overhead, improves communication, and strengthens auditability. It ensures that monitoring and control are transparent and defensible, not hidden or improvised. The register becomes the backbone of governance, demonstrating that risks are tracked and addressed systematically. Traceability practices link changes directly to the risks they address, preserving accountability and enabling honest effectiveness reviews. For example, if a remediation deploys a new security protocol, traceability ties that change to the original vulnerability and the decision to act. This linkage allows reviewers to assess whether the action truly reduced exposure. Without traceability, organizations risk claiming progress without proof. Traceability also builds resilience, as future teams can understand the rationale behind past changes and avoid repeating mistakes. It creates a lineage of evidence, showing how risks evolve and how decisions responded. By making traceability routine, organizations reinforce integrity in risk management. Monitoring then becomes not just about signals but about building a transparent chain from detection through response to outcome validation. Communication protocols guide how stakeholders are informed during elevated risk periods. Clear, factual updates reduce speculation, duplication, and rumor. For example, during an incident, updates may follow a structured format: current status, actions taken, next review time, and owner. This consistency reassures stakeholders and prevents confusion. Communication protocols also define audiences, technical detail for engineers, summary impacts for sponsors, and plain language explanations for external partners if needed. By formalizing communication, organizations prevent chaos and protect credibility during stressful periods. These protocols also reinforce transparency, demonstrating that information flows openly rather than selectively. Structured communication ensures that monitoring outputs and control actions are understood, trusted, and aligned across the organization. Privacy and confidentiality guardrails preserve trust while maintaining visibility. Not all details about risks or incidents can be shared broadly, especially when sensitive data or personal identifiers are involved. Guardrails define what can be redacted, aggregated, or masked without undermining effective coordination. For example, a security vulnerability may be described by category and impact without exposing exploitable details. Guardrails reassure stakeholders that transparency is balanced with duty of care. They also protect organizations from legal or reputational harm. By making boundaries explicit, monitoring and control remain credible and safe. Openness is maximized without compromising confidentiality, ensuring that vigilance does not create new risks in the pursuit of accountability. Remote-friendly control ensures that monitoring and response remain effective in distributed environments. Practices include searchable updates, recorded debriefs, and clear response windows so contributors in different time zones can engage equitably. For example, when a threshold is breached, a standardized update may be posted in a shared channel, with debriefs recorded for later review. These practices prevent co-located participants from dominating responses and ensure inclusivity. Remote-friendly norms also maintain tempo, as responses no longer depend on physical presence or synchronous meetings. By designing monitoring and control for remote resilience, organizations sustain vigilance in modern work environments. This inclusivity ensures that evidence-based responses are consistent and accessible, regardless of geography. Integration with delivery artifacts embeds risk indicators directly on items and goals, so monitoring rides alongside everyday work. For example, backlog cards may include risk signals like error budget consumption or dependency health. Increment goals may display associated risks and thresholds. This integration prevents risks from becoming invisible in separate systems. It also reinforces that risk management is not separate from delivery, but part of it. Embedding signals in delivery artifacts ensures that teams make trade-offs with full visibility. It reduces context switching and builds accountability. This practice keeps risk management operational rather than abstract, ensuring that monitoring is continuous and visible in the same places where decisions are made. Reclassification rules prevent the register from stagnating by moving items between accepted, mitigated, and active states as evidence evolves. For example, a risk initially accepted with intolerance may be reclassified to active if signals worsen. Conversely, a mitigated risk may return to active if controls fail. Reclassification ensures that categories reflect reality, not past assumptions. It also builds transparency, as stakeholders can see how risks change over time. Without these rules, registers fill with outdated entries, eroding trust. Reclassification demonstrates that monitoring is dynamic, not ceremonial. It keeps vigilance honest, ensuring that attention remains aligned with current evidence. Anti-patterns undermine monitoring and control when vigilance becomes theater rather than substance. Dashboard theater produces attractive charts without defined responses, leaving risks unaddressed. Hidden cues bury risks outside the register, eroding transparency. Ad hoc escalations bypass agreed pathways, creating confusion and undermining trust. These anti-patterns signal immaturity, where visibility is valued for appearance rather than action. By naming and rejecting them, organizations preserve discipline. Monitoring and control must remain principled, turning signals into responses systematically. Avoiding these pitfalls sustains credibility, ensuring that vigilance is respected as meaningful protection rather than hollow performance. Anti-pattern awareness reinforces the integrity of monitoring practices, keeping them outcome-focused. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Detection playbooks translate ambiguous signals into structured responses that can be followed under pressure. They specify checks to run, containment steps to take, and verification tests to confirm whether exposure has been reduced. For example, a playbook for rising error rates might include checking logs for root causes, rolling back the most recent change, and running synthetic tests to verify recovery. By documenting these steps in advance, organizations reduce cognitive load during stressful moments when clarity is scarce. Playbooks also embed consistency, ensuring that similar issues are handled in predictable ways across teams. They are living documents, refined after each incident or near miss, capturing organizational learning. Detection playbooks turn monitoring from raw observation into actionable guidance, ensuring that teams can respond quickly, confidently, and proportionately when signals move outside expected ranges. Escalation pathways define how and when local teams must engage leadership, partners, or specialized responders. Not every risk can be managed within the capacity of a single group, and failing to escalate on time creates compounding harm. Pathways clarify thresholds where escalation is mandatory and outline roles for those who take over. For example, a data breach indicator may require escalation from engineering to an incident commander, legal, and communications within 1 hour. Escalation maps also include external partners, ensuring that vendors and regulators are contacted consistently when obligations demand it. By rehearsing these pathways, organizations make them familiar and automatic, reducing hesitation in the moment. Clear escalation ensures that risks are handled at the appropriate level, preserving both speed and accountability, while reducing confusion and finger-pointing under stress. Control effectiveness reviews provide the feedback necessary to keep safeguards strong. They compare observed outcomes against the expectations set when controls were defined. For example, if a preventative control, such as automated input validation, fails to reduce defect escape rates, it may require redesign. Reviews distinguish between weak controls that provide little protection and noisy controls that generate too many false alarms. Both types erode confidence and waste resources. By scheduling reviews on a set cadence, organizations prevent controls from being assumed effective indefinitely. Effectiveness reviews also validate whether monitoring thresholds remain calibrated or whether evolving risks require adjustments. This practice ensures that controls stay proportionate, relevant, and reliable. It reinforces that risk management is iterative. Even safeguards must be tested and improved, not simply deployed and forgotten. Feedback loops close the gap between incidents and prevention by updating indicators, thresholds, and playbooks based on lessons learned. Every incident or near miss generates valuable data: what signals were visible, which thresholds were breached, and how effective responses proved. By feeding this information back into monitoring design, organizations sharpen vigilance. For example, if latency issues were not detected early enough, new leading indicators may be added to catch them sooner. Feedback loops also refine detection playbooks, ensuring that next-time responses are faster and more accurate. This process turns pain into progress, preventing repetition of the same mistakes. It institutionalizes humility, acknowledging that monitoring must evolve with reality. By embedding feedback loops, organizations ensure that monitoring and control grow stronger with every test, turning setbacks into continuous improvement. Vendor monitoring extends vigilance across external boundaries by aligning third-party service-level agreements, change notices, and incident communication with internal thresholds. Many risks originate from outside partners, such as cloud providers or critical suppliers. Without integration, organizations may be blindsided by outages or policy shifts. Vendor monitoring includes tracking SLA compliance, requiring timely notifications of changes, and testing interfaces regularly with contract-level indicators. For example, if a provider introduces a new API version, synthetic tests may confirm backward compatibility before adoption. This alignment ensures that external dependencies are monitored with the same rigor as internal systems. It also reinforces accountability as vendors share responsibility for transparency. By embedding vendor monitoring, organizations extend control into their ecosystems, acknowledging that resilience depends not only on internal discipline, but also on proactive collaboration with external partners. Compliance-aligned evidence captures approvals, test results, and retention notes as part of routine monitoring updates. Instead of producing separate paperwork during audits, evidence accumulates continuously. For example, when a risk is mitigated, the monitoring log records the decision, actions taken, and signals observed. This trace creates a defensible history that satisfies auditors without duplicating effort. By aligning compliance needs with everyday control practices, organizations avoid the disruption of bolt-on reporting. Compliance alignment also strengthens credibility, showing regulators and stakeholders that vigilance is not superficial but embedded into daily operations. This integration reinforces that governance and agility can coexist, speed is preserved, and accountability is continuous. By capturing evidence as part of monitoring, organizations make compliance seamless, defensible, and sustainable over time. Risk burndown observation validates whether exposure is truly shrinking. Monitoring alone can produce activity without progress if risks remain unsolved. Burndown reviews scan trends in severity mix, recurrence, and time to contain. For example, a reduction in high-severity incidents paired with faster containment times provides evidence that monitoring and control are working. Conversely, if the same risks recur repeatedly, burndown shows that mitigations were superficial. Observing burndown ensures that focus remains on reducing exposure, not just processing signals. It also highlights whether systemic fixes are advancing or if firefighting dominates. This practice provides stakeholders with proof that investments in monitoring and control translate into safer, more reliable delivery. By tracking burndown, organizations demonstrate accountability and reinforce trust that vigilance is producing real, measurable improvements in resilience. Capacity and load checks ensure that monitoring systems do not overwhelm teams during extended risk periods. Prolonged exposure, such as extended incident response or multiple concurrent risks, can overload on-call staff, saturate review queues, and increase burnout. By monitoring human load on-call rotations, alert volume, and backlog pressure, organizations protect sustainability. For example, if alert frequency exceeds manageable thresholds, teams may refine indicators or adjust escalation paths. Capacity checks also ensure that reviews remain effective. Overloaded reviewers cannot provide meaningful scrutiny. By balancing technical vigilance with human sustainability, organizations preserve reliability over time. This discipline acknowledges that people are the backbone of monitoring systems. Protecting their pace is essential for long-term resilience, preventing the monitoring process itself from becoming an impediment. A portfolio view aggregates risks and impediments across teams, highlighting systemic patterns that require coordinated controls. Local monitoring may show isolated exposures, but only a portfolio lens reveals organization-wide trends. For example, multiple teams may struggle with similar vendor issues or repeated compliance risks. By aggregating, leaders can prioritize systemic fixes, allocate shared resources, and prevent duplication of effort. The portfolio view also clarifies where risks interact, creating exposure larger than any single team perceives. This systemic visibility strengthens governance, ensuring that responses match the true scale of exposure. It also builds fairness, as prioritization reflects collective needs rather than isolated voices. A portfolio perspective ensures that monitoring and control mature from team-level vigilance into enterprise-level resilience, aligning action with organizational strategy. Incident linkage ties risk register items to actual events and outcomes, improving attribution and future prioritization. For example, If a backlog item flagged a vendor dependency and a subsequent outage occurred, linking them documents that the risk was real and costly. This linkage also validates severity scoring, showing whether predictions aligned with impact. By connecting risks to incidents, organizations learn which signals are most predictive and which categories deserve more attention. Linkage also strengthens accountability, proving that risks were visible before failures and reinforcing the importance of addressing them. It prevents the erasure of warnings, showing clearly when ignored risks caused harm. By tying monitoring items to real incidents, organizations refine prioritization and prevent history from repeating itself. Rehearsal and game day exercises build confidence in monitoring and control by practicing responses to likely scenarios. These simulations test not only technical safeguards but also communication, escalation, and decision-making. For example, a game day may simulate a vendor outage, requiring teams to follow playbooks, escalate appropriately, and provide stakeholder updates. Rehearsals reveal gaps safely, showing where thresholds are unclear or controls are weak. They also build muscle memory, ensuring that responses are fast and coordinated during real incidents. By practicing, organizations reduce hesitation and confusion under stress. Game days make monitoring and control proactive, demonstrating that resilience is not only theoretical but operational. They turn plans into rehearsed capabilities, embedding confidence and agility into the system. Continuous pruning keeps monitoring systems lean and effective. Over time, dashboards, indicators, and alerts accumulate, diluting attention and increasing noise. By retiring obsolete measures and consolidating duplicates, organizations preserve focus on high-signal items. For example, if two alerts track overlapping latency measures, they may be merged. If an indicator no longer predicts outcomes, it should be retired. Pruning prevents fatigue, where teams ignore dashboards cluttered with irrelevant signals. It also keeps monitoring adaptive, aligned with current risks and strategy. By maintaining discipline, organizations ensure that vigilance remains sharp rather than ceremonial. Continuous pruning proves that monitoring is dynamic, not static, evolving as threats, technologies, and objectives change. A learning repository transforms monitoring from isolated cycles into cumulative improvement. Verified patterns, failure modes, and effective responses are recorded and shared across teams. For example, a repository might capture that certain error spikes precede outages reliably, or that specific containment steps consistently reduce impact. These insights become templates, raising organizational readiness. The repository reduces duplication of mistakes and accelerates learning, ensuring that each incident strengthens the system. It also democratizes expertise, making knowledge accessible beyond specialists. By institutionalizing learning, monitoring evolves continuously, compounding maturity across the organization. The repository ensures that vigilance improves with time, embedding resilience as a shared capability rather than an individual skill. Success evidence validates whether monitoring and control are delivering outcomes that matter. Indicators include fewer escalations, faster containment, and declining recurrence rates. For example, stakeholders may note that incidents resolve more quickly and rarely repeat, or that fewer surprises reach executive attention. These outcomes demonstrate that vigilance is working, transforming signals into proportionate action. Success evidence sustains investment, proving that monitoring produces tangible benefits. It also reinforces morale, as teams see their efforts translate into real protection of stability and trust. By tracking success, organizations close the loop, ensuring that vigilance remains purposeful. Monitoring and control are judged not by the volume of dashboards but by the reduction of exposure, making resilience visible, credible, and continuous. Monitoring and control synthesis emphasizes that vigilance requires both planned indicators and rehearsed responses. Monitoring plans and early warning signals detect precursors, thresholds, and playbooks convert them into proportionate action, and escalation pathways ensure that capacity is matched to scale. Effectiveness reviews, feedback loops, and vendor monitoring refine safeguards continuously, while evidence capture and compliance alignment make the system defensible. Portfolio views, rehearsals, pruning, and repositories extend learning across the organization, ensuring that monitoring matures sustainably. Success evidence confirms that exposure is reduced, incidents decline, and delivery remains reliable. Together, these practices transform monitoring and control into a living system of resilience, predictable, transparent, and adaptive, keeping risk within tolerances while preserving the pace and trustworthiness of delivery. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.